Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a massive question, one that sits at the very heart of, well, everything. What actually pushes the human story forward? Let's dive in.
Really think about that for a second. Is the world we live in today the product of a few brilliant or maybe terrible individuals? Or are we all just being shaped by forces way bigger than any one person? Things like geography or technology. That's the huge question we're going to try and unpack today.
So, to try and get a handle on this, we're going to look at the past through four completely different lenses. First up, we'll talk about the power of individuals. Then, we're going to zoom way out and look at the environment. After that, we'll shift to ideas. And finally, we'll see how it all just crashes together. Okay, so this first one is probably the most classic way to look at history, right? The story of kings, queens, presidents, and generals. It's the whole idea that one single person's will can literally bend the arc of civilization. But how true is that really?
Now, what's so fascinating about this is the raw personal conflict it shows. This wasn't about some grand political philosophy. Nope. This was about two incredibly powerful men, President Roosevelt and New York's master builder, Robert Moses, who were locked in this intense battle of wills. One person who was there called it real hatred. And that personal beef directly affected these huge public works projects, bridges, highways, you name it, that would go on to shape the lives of millions of people for decades, all because of one person's stubbornness against another's.
All right, let's jump to another massive moment in history. For 1,000 years, the walls of Constantinople were legendary. People thought they were unbreakable. But then, in 1453, the young Sultan Mehmet II shows up, and he has this one single-minded goal. And his confidence wasn't just in his massive army, it was in his vision to use this brand new, absolutely terrifying weapon. It's a perfect case of how a leader's strategic thinking and their willingness to embrace something new can literally redraw the map of the world. And you see this pattern everywhere. Constantine the Great just decides to build a new capital for the Roman Empire, and boom, Constantinople becomes the center of the world for a millennium. Or you take Augustus, who came from a pretty simple background, and he completely imposes his own personal vision on Rome, creating the Roman Empire as we know it. And then during the Third Crusade, the personal rivalry between King Richard of England and King Philip of France got so bad that Philip literally just packed his bags and went home, completely dooming the whole campaign. The point is, again and again, the personal decisions and feelings of single individuals have become these massive turning points in history.
Okay, but what if all those powerful leaders were just pawns on a game board they didn't even design? Let's completely flip this on its head now and look through a different lens. What if our physical world, our geography, is the real puppet master? Is it possible that where you're born determines your destiny?
So there's this really influential, though, pretty debated idea that history played out differently on different continents simply because the continents themselves are different. Take Eurasia, for example. It had this incredible geographic lottery ticket. It had the best plants for farming, like wheat and barley, and the best animals to domesticate, like cows and horses. And, this is crucial, its main axis is east-west. That means crops, animals, and even ideas could spread for thousands of miles across similar climates. That just wasn't possible on the north-south axes of the Americas or Africa. And this table just lays it all out crystal clear. Look at those dates. Farming kicked off in Southwest Asia around 8500 BCE. In the eastern United States, it didn't really get going for another 6,000 years. That's an unbelievable head start. More food means bigger populations. Bigger populations lead to people specializing in different jobs, which leads to writing, new technologies, and complex governments. It's like an engine of development that's powered by the land itself. Just stop and think about that for a second. Could the greatest empires and the most famous leaders actually owe their success, at the very root of it all, to the simple luck of being born on a continent with the right kind of wheat and the right kind of goats? It's a wild thought.
So we've had powerful people and we've had powerful places. But what about a third engine of history? Powerful ideas. These are the forces you can't see or touch. Inventions, beliefs, ideologies that can completely revolutionize a society from the inside out.
And we're back to Constantinople, but we're looking at it through this new lens. Sure, Mehmet II was the leader, but you could argue the real agent of change here, the real force, was the idea of gunpowder. It was a technological concept that, once it was let loose, made 1,000 years of military strategy pretty much obsolete overnight. The idea, inside those cannons, was an unstoppable force that brought a whole empire to its knees. And if you want a modern-day example, Look no further than this. This idea was only born a couple of decades ago. Surveillance capitalism. It's not a physical thing, you can't hold it. It's a whole new economic logic, a new idea about how to make money. And yet, this one concept is completely restructuring our economies, our politics, and even how we see ourselves. It's an idea that says human experience itself is a raw material to be mined for profit, and it's rewiring the world as we speak.
And maybe the ultimate example of a powerful idea is Darwin's theory of natural selection. This was way more than just a scientific discovery. It was a conceptual bombshell. The idea that all of life evolves through competition and adaptation without some grand divine plan, well, it completely upended humanity's understanding of itself and its place in the universe. Very few ideas in history have ever had that kind of profound, lasting impact.
So we've got leaders, we've got the environment, and we've got ideas. But of course, history is never that neat and tidy, is it? These engines aren't running on separate tracks. They are a tangled web constantly crashing into each other, reshaping one another in ways that are complex and honestly often terrifying. Take one of the most brutal examples you can imagine. In the lands that were stuck between Hitler's Germany and Stalin's Soviet Union, you see these forces collide with absolutely devastating results. You had two leaders, Hitler and Stalin, both driven by these radical ideologies, two very powerful sets of ideas. When their ambitions smashed together in that specific part of the world, they created what one historian calls the Bloodlands. And this isn't some isolated case. Whenever these engines collide, think about religious ideas meeting imperial ambition when Europeans colonized the Americas, the results are always transformative, always unpredictable, and they shape the world we're all living in today.
Okay, so let's try and pull all these threads together. We've seen how the will of one person, like Augustus, can completely reshape a state. We've seen how the environment can set the whole stage, giving a continent like Eurasia a massive head start. And we've seen how a single idea, a technology like gunpowder, can change the rules of the game for everyone. And so often, these forces just slam into each other, creating centuries of conflict like the Crusades, where personal ambition, resources, and powerful beliefs all got mixed up together. But here's the thing. Even with all these different lenses, we have to be careful not to see history as some simple, predictable machine. This quote here challenges one of the most basic stories we tell ourselves, that human history followed this one straight line from tiny hunter-gatherer bands to the complex states we have today. The authors of this book argue that our ancestors were actually way more flexible, way more experimental than we give them credit for. And what that suggests is that history isn't just one single story. It's this incredibly complex series of choices, accidents, and possibilities. None of these engines guarantees a specific outcome. And that brings us right back to now, to today. As you look at the world around you, which engine do you think is in the driver's seat? Is it the will of a few powerful individuals? Is it the inescapable reality of our changing climate? Is it the disruptive power of new technologies and ideas like AI? Or is it that age-old engine of conflict? Which one do you think is writing the next chapter of our story?